All right, so here is your end of module task checklist. So yesterday I gave you the breakdown of the actual task, and then I also gave you the model essay that I read through, as well as going over 4 important elements that you need to include in your narrative writing piece. And so this checklist is so that you can revise your paper from yesterday. So I am going to be returning your assignments back, and so you're going to go back to yesterday's classwork, which was lesson 35 classwork, and you are going to go back to your EOM end of module task narrative writing document, and you're going to edit. Okay, and so I want you to use this checklist to help you go through your paper and see what you can change and revise to fix and improve. Okay. So I want to also emphasize, some of you submitted this checklist back to me, which is great. You wrote down plus or triangle, but again, don't worry about that. You don't need to send this paper in to me. What I care more about is you rereading your paper and adding revisions, okay? All right, so for the first part of this checklist, I need you to make sure that you use details about immigration and finding a new home to create a piece of realistic fiction. So again, this is, this is making sure you're including facts that you've learned based on experiences that we've read so far through any of our texts. That includes Grandfather's Journey, Tea with Milk, Coming to America, and The Keeping Quilt. As well as, I don't know if you remember, there was an article we read earlier in the module where we read through different reasons why people immigrated to the United States. So you can include that. You can include any organizers we used from those texts, including the timeline from Coming to America. Use these resources to help you create more details in your narrative writing piece. Okay. And then 2, super important, that you wrote from your character's point of view, right? So again, those main characters I want to emphasize are Grandfather, Masako, Anna, and Carmen, right? So you can only write from those 4 perspectives or point of view. Okay? All right. So then next part is I respond to all parts of the prompt. That is making sure that you reveal characters' actions, thoughts, feelings, as well as including dialogue in your paper. Okay. You also need to make sure you introduce the narrator and characters. You organize events in a natural order, so making sure that there is some kind of order of events that is happening throughout your moment or your exploded moment. And like I said in my previous video or through a Google Meet session, is that the setting does not need to be one specific time, right? It can be, you can spread it out to a couple of days, right? But we don't want it to be just telling us about what their day was like, but instead revealing to your reader of what that character wants, right? The problem in your story, the conflict. There needs to be some kind of conflict, whether it be something like an actual problem, or it can be just something the character wants that doesn't have in that moment. Okay. So you also need to make sure you establish the setting. Like I said, it can be over a couple of days, or it can be one night or one afternoon. I also want you to give more details of where the character actually is. So again, with Grandfather, that means he is he's traveling across America. So he is looking at the farm fields and he is amazed, right? He marveled at it. So we know that it's positive feelings that he's feeling as he's traveling. And so you can describe based from the illustration as well as what you know about exploring a new place and how you felt inside, right? So that could be that for Grandfather's Journey. Again, Masako, her feelings towards going towards a new school, right? If you've ever entered a new space, like if you've ever moved to a different part of New York or a different state or a new school, right? That first feeling, but also understanding that she couldn't speak the language, right? So remembering those things as well as what you know about a school, and based off the illustration, you can describe in detail what the setting is for Masako. What does a school look like? How does that school look different than Brooklyn Charter School, right? Okay. Then providing a sense of closure, again, making sure that whatever the character wants or the conflict is resolved at the end of your narrative writing piece. Using time words and phrases to tell your reader when events happen. That is going back into that anchor chart, as well as using, we also call them sequence words, right? So making sure you're using that when you're describing the different events that are taking place in your narrative writing piece. All right, that's the first part. And then the second part, so development. So making sure, again, you're using dialogue and your description to develop events, using details, right? That's where the graphic organizer from yesterday, the Thought Shot dialogue chart, comes into play, where you're including those 5 senses, right? To make your events more detailed, and using description to develop events and characters. Yes. That's kind of repetitive, but moving on. Okay, using vocabulary words that are appropriate to the topic. So using those vocabulary words that we've been talking about so far in this module, possibly traditions, immigrate, right? Any of those words. And if you're talking about, specific to whichever character or exploded moment you chose, that is also going to determine what vocabulary words you picked, right? So you're not going to be using the word kimono when you're writing about Anna, right, in the Keeping Quilt. And you're not going to be writing about a babushka if you're writing about grandfather, or if you chose grandfather and grandfather's journey. So making sure that you use these words that we've learned appropriate to whichever exploded moment you picked for your writing piece, okay? Don't worry about circling at least 3 new vocabulary words. I will be looking for those words on my own as I'm grading your work, so do not worry about that. And your writing is appropriate for the purpose and the audience of the task, your audience being your teachers, as well as the purpose is to be able to write a narrative writing piece. And again, I want to remind you that this is your final writing piece for Module 3, and this is a wrap, right? So today is a wrap of Module 3. We're going to be ending it, and we're going to be moving on to our next module, Module 4, Artists Make Art, next week. So we really, really want to spend time perfecting this paper, because I want this paper to be something that you can proudly say that you completed during remote learning. And it's been difficult, and we understand it's not easy to ask 3rd graders to be writing an essay online, right, without even having us here for you to do really writing conferences live. And I know we provide feedback and things like that, but it's not as accessible as it would be if we were there with you in person. But I do want this writing piece to be the best out of all the ones that you've written so far, and something that you can print out and proudly say, I worked hard on this. This shows, I can show this to my family, I can show this to my classmates, I can show this to my future teachers, my 4th grade teacher, that this is something that I worked on during this time of remote learning, and something that I can showcase all the knowledge that I've gained from learning about immigration for the past 10 weeks. Okay? So anyways, moving on. Conventions and writing process. Again, I always kind of skim through this section because we don't really focus too much on that. I'd rather you focus on really the content and the meat of your writing piece, which is including details about immigration that we've learned so far, as well as your knowledge of the text that we've been reading so far. So again, it'll show me if you've really been paying attention based on the details that you include in your writing piece, right? Making sure that it's aligned and it flows and makes sense in that story from Alan Say, Patricia Polacco, or Carmen Lomas Garza. Okay? Alright, so ending Module 3 on immigration, I just felt it necessary to end with another reading passage learning about a different tradition that we haven't really read about yet. And so today I wanted to read to you Hawaii's traditional hula dance, now that we know what traditions are as well as culture. And I just thought this would enrich us and our knowledge of the world, right? Knowledge of the world, as we are always trying to gain more of that. All right. So, yes. So before we get there, I just want to emphasize that today will be the last day for Module 3, Immigration. We will continue our culture project if we can, seeing how remote learning is going. But yes, so today we are going to be talking about hula, and this should look familiar if you've watched the famous Disney movie Moana, or even a bit older movie or movie series Lilo and Stitch, because the setting of those two movies do take place in Hawaii, and actually both characters in the movies do show themselves hula dancing. And so we're going to be learning more about that, as well as the myth behind it. So let's take a look. All right, so here's a photograph. So we know our genre is going to be nonfiction, right? As well as understanding that we're reading about Hawaii, which is a real state, one of the 50 states in the United States of America. It's a group of islands, and so we know that that's a real place, and so we are most likely going to be reading nonfiction. So taking a look at this blurb, hula dancing is an ancient Hawaiian art form. Over the centuries, hula has been the subject of myths, laws, and bans, but it persists today as a rich and important part of native Hawaiian culture. Read on to learn more about hula. So this is by Readworks, illustrations by Vanessa Helfrich. So the hula is a traditional Hawaiian dance. It is known partly for its smooth and graceful movements of the arms, hands, and hips. Hula dancers often mimic movements from nature. Their movements may look like trees in the wind or waves in the water. The dancers also tell a story with their movements. Chants, or meli, go along with the movements to help tell the story. So again, looking at vocabulary, we know if we're, you see the word or and 2 commas in between, that probably means that word meli means chants. And that looks like a loan word, right? Doesn't sound like a word that we know in English. There are many myths as to how the hula dance originated. One legend says that Pele, the volcano goddess, danced the first hula dance. According to this myth, Pele was running from her sister, the goddess of the oceans. She was trying to find a place where she couldn't be touched by the ocean waves. She finally found such a place. It was a chain of craters on the island of Hawaii. There, Pele danced the first hula to show that she had beaten her sister. Although people today dance the hula freely, the dance was actually banned during part of the 1800s. It was banned by Christian missionaries who arrived in Hawaii in 1820. Before then, the hula was used in religious ceremonies, but the missionaries did not approve of the religious ceremonies the people of Hawaii were holding, or the dancing that went with them. After it was banned, the dance continued to be taught and danced secretly. But as more Hawaiians started becoming Christians, the dance became a dying part of Hawaiian culture. All of this changed during the reign of Hawaii's last king, David Kalakaua. He was the king from 1874 to 1891. He encouraged hula dancing to come back out into the open. As a result, the dance resurfaced, now with new movements, costumes, and song. Today, the hula tradition lives on in Hawaii. The end. All right, so now it's time to answer 5 short response or longer responses, depending on how much you want to write, about this text. All right, so here is your questions that you need to respond to. So going down, this is the photograph that you saw in the text that we just read. And then this is the text from the book, but just all put in one area. So if you'd like to reread the text, you can over here. And then here is a vocabulary word: mimic, to copy or imitate, often playfully or as part of a learning process. This word is in relation to the hula dancing, mimicking nature, right? The movements of hula, mimicking nature. All right, so your first question is, the hula is a traditional Hawaiian dance. Describe the movements in the hula dance. So I gave you a little hint there. Number 2, even though the hula dance was banned by Christians who arrived in Hawaii in the 1800s, people from Hawaii continue to secretly teach and dance the hula. Based on this evidence, what conclusion can you draw about how people from Hawaii felt about the hula? So how did the people from Hawaii feel about hula dancing, or the hula? Number 3, what is the main idea of this text? The main idea is what the text is. Hopefully you answered it out loud. Mostly about. So what is this text mostly about? Please write that down here. Number 4, summarize the legend from the text about the first hula dance. So what is the story that people used to tell about how the first hula dance came to be? Number 5, nature is important in Hawaiian culture. Argue for or against this statement using evidence from the text. So that means you have to agree or disagree that nature is important in Hawaiian culture. So you can say, nature is important in Hawaiian culture because blank, and then continue explaining. You can also write, nature is not important in Hawaiian culture because blank. I'll also give you a reason as well as evidence from the text. So you do need to go back and find some evidence from here that'll tell you that nature is important or is not important in Hawaiian culture. All right, and that's it. Those are the 5 questions you need to answer about this text. Good luck, and that is a wrap for Module 3. You do have one exit ticket left that kind of summarizes what you've learned throughout this module. All right, so here is your final exit ticket for Module 3. So this is what it looks like. So this is going to be a little less formal. It does need to be 3 quality sentences that you need to write, but I want you to answer as many of the following questions as you like from the list below. Treat this as your final exit ticket, as well as a reflection of how you feel about what you've learned so far in Module 3 about immigration. Okay? And so you can write more than 3 sentences if you'd like. You can put it as a letter to me or to your homeroom teacher or however you'd like. This is more of just an ending piece and a reflection of what you've learned. Okay, so some of the questions that you can answer are, what new knowledge did you gain from Module 3? What do you want to learn more about regarding immigration? How could you find more information about immigration? What are some challenges immigrants face in a new country? Why do people immigrate to America? How do immigrants respond to challenges in new countries? That should sound familiar because those are your 3 focusing questions. And also, what new skills did you learn in this module? So that can be writing skills, that can be reading skills, that can be knowledge about realistic fiction, or specific vocabulary words that you learned that really stuck to you, that spoke to you, or even a specific skill in character actions, thoughts, feelings, sequencing, anything, another skill that you feel that you really were able to get a better grasp on. You can include that in this reflection. So please pour out your heart and anything you'd like to say about how you feel about Module 3 as well. Okay, and then this will be a wrap of Module 3, and then we will begin Module 4 next week.